Hi there, Ryan Gupta here, and this is 5 Minute Theology. Today we will do part 2 of how to study the Bible. In the first part, we talked about understanding the difference between a descriptive passage and a prescriptive passage. And we said that at times the Bible will describe something, but it's not prescribing that we do it. It's recording something, it's not requiring you to do it. So today we want to look at a second principle, and that principle is this: you have to know when to follow a biblical practice and when to follow the principles behind that practice. So there are certain practices in the New Testament or in the Bible that today we're not required to follow those practices, but we are required to follow the principles behind those practices. And that has to do with the culture that we live in. Remember, we said there's a culture gap. We are not living in the culture of the Bible. We are living in the 21st century culture. And so there are certain practices that we see in the Bible. And today people will ask the question, do we have to do this? Do I have to do that? And while we may not have to do it, we must obey the principles, or we must understand the principles behind those practices. Let me give you an example. Remember in the book of John when Jesus washed the feet of the disciples? Now today some churches do foot washing services. Do we have to do that? Well, we don't have to do it, but that's up to you. You are free to do it if you want to do it. The point is, when we apply this principle to those passages, we discover that we are not living in a culture. So again, we don't have to follow certain practices, but we have to follow the principles behind those practices. So Jesus washed the feet of the disciples. Now here's a question: why did Jesus wash the disciples' feet? Again, in those days, many people wore sandals, and the sandals did not cover their entire feet. There was opening, and so those people would walk the dirty roads of Jerusalem, the dusty road, and sometimes you had mud on the road, sometimes you had animal dung on the road, and by the time you got to the home of someone, your feet was dirty and kind of filthy. And in those days, sometimes they would not sit on a table, but they would sit on the floor in a circle, and then everybody would see the person's dirty feet, and that person could have feel embarrassed or insulted. So when you showed up at somebody's home to show hospitality, to show servanthood, that person would offer to wash your feet. Now we don't live in that culture, or we live in a culture where most of the time our feet is not dirty, and we show up at somebody's home, but our greatest need is not a foot washing. So again, we live in a different culture. So how do we obey that principle of hospitality and generosity? Today, if somebody show up by you, their greatest need may be a cup of water. But imagine you saying, hey, let me wash your feet, and that person is saying, no, I don't need a foot washing, I just need a cup of water. And you say, no, Jesus washed the feet of the disciples, and you're washing the person's feet, and then they collapse from thirst. So again, it doesn't really add up. What's the principle? The principle is understanding the principles behind those practices and then applying it into your own culture. So the principle behind foot washing was hospitality, was servanthood. How do I apply those principles in my culture? Again, today you meet the person's need. What is their need? That person, their entire feet may be covered up. It's not dirty. They show up by you. They need a cup of cold water. You wash their feet by giving them a cup of cold water. You meet their immediate need. We are not living in that culture where everybody's feet was kind of dirty after walking the road. So again, in cases like that, you take the principles behind those practices and you apply them into your own culture. Let me give you another example. Remember Paul said to greet one another with a holy kiss? Well, Paul was living in that culture where a kiss on the cheek was a common way to greet somebody, to show brotherhood, to show unity. But we live in a culture where people don't really greet each other with a holy kiss. When last did somebody greet you with a holy kiss? But remember, when you go into church, when you show up at church, the ushers would probably shake your hand, welcome you, and give you a hug. Well, that's equivalent to giving somebody a holy kiss. So again, what is the principle behind greeting someone with a holy kiss? It's showing them unity. It's showing them brotherly love. It's showing them kindness. It's making them feel welcome. So today when somebody show up at your church, how do you make them feel welcome? Again, we want to apply the principle into our own practice. Our practice is not holy kissing. Our practice is a handshake, it's a hug, it's a pong, and we make them feel welcome, we make them feel special. So again, the second principle is about knowing when to take the principles behind a biblical practice and apply those principles into your modern day culture. So we don't have to wash people's feet today if it's not dirty, if they don't need that, but we should meet their needs when they come to us. We should find a way to be a blessing to them, to show them servanthood, to show them humility, and to show them generosity. And again, today somebody may show up at your home and they may need a cup of cold water, and that's how you wash their feet. That's how you show them servanthood, by offering them what they need. In doing so, you are taking the principles from the foot washing practice and applying it into your own culture so that it can be effective. So I trust that this was a blessing to you. God bless you.